Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're wading deep into the churning waters of the Caribbean, specifically to explore the story of Hurricane Melissa and the enduring nation of Jamaica.
Hmm.
This isn't just a discussion about, barometric pressure or wind speed. It's a profound, detailed study in how a country faces these existential threats.
Yeah, and it does it by balancing the precise, cutting-edge science of meteorology with a profound spiritual faith that really guides their survival.
Exactly.
And that balance, I think, is the key to understanding this dive. We're unpacking source material that vividly captures this dual reality. You've got the data points from Miami's National Hurricane Center sort of overlaid onto the deep cultural landscape of the island.
Right.
Our mission for you, the listener, is to move beyond the headlines and find those critical aha moments where practical, urgent preparation meets cultural depth.
Revealing the complex, layered architecture of Jamaican resilience.
That's it. We're watching what happens when objective data meets deeply felt devotion. Quite something.
And it all starts, as one source describes it, with, well, basically nothing more than an organized rumor over the vast, shimmering Atlantic.
Yeah, tropical depressions don't start with a roar, do they?
No, they begin as this pale swirl, an unformed potential given a simple name, Melissa. But in the islands, there's this deep historical understanding that rumors, just like storms, they don't stay polite.
They grow. They gather energy from the warm sea, absolutely. And they quickly take on lives of their own until that pale spiral earns its terrifying official title, Hurricane Melissa.
And it's framed immediately right from the naming convention, as something living, something almost sentient, something that demands attention and respect.
It's a crucial narrative approach, I think, framing the weather not as just a cold scientific fact, a simple low-pressure system, but as a living entity. It elevates the response beyond just simple preparedness. By the time that hurricane title is earned, the entire Caribbean, particularly Jamaica, has already shifted psychological gears. The air doesn't just feel humid, it feels expectant, heavy with destiny almost.
So let's unpack this threat scientifically. We need to understand the physical reality that Jamaica faced. When you look at the meteorological charts, the satellite imagery, what was the clinical anatomy of Hurricane Melissa?
Well, our sources describe the storm's eye as a roughly 25 miles wide void, a calm center, relatively speaking,
Relatively.
surrounded by these bands of convection that glowed in angry reds and oranges on the satellite images. That indicates extreme intensity, obviously.
And what's essential to grasp is the physics of its movement, right? Because that determines the entire risk profile.
Absolutely, because Melissa formed and traveled through the northern hemisphere, it rotated counterclockwise. Now, this counterclockwise rotation isn't just an interesting detail. It's a matter of life and death.
Dictated by the Coriolis effect.
Exactly, the Earth's rotation steering the winds. And this physical reality immediately translates into the defining characteristic of every hurricane, its dangerous quadrants.
Right. And that leads directly to the core of the danger. We talk about the right front quadrant. For our listeners who might not be constantly tracking weather, why is this specific section of the storm, the side leading the storm's forward movement, why is it so much more devastating?
It is unequivocally the dangerous side because of simple addition, really.
Yeah.
You have the rotational wind speed of the storm itself, which is already immense, say maybe 110 miles per hour in this case.
Okay.
Then you add that rotational speed to the speed at which the entire storm system is moving forward, let's say 15 miles per hour. Those two velocities stack on top of each other.
Ah, I see.
Suddenly on that right side, you're not facing 110 mile per hour winds. You're facing 125 mile per hour gusts, maybe more. And that translates into an exponential increase in destructive force.
Exponential.
This is where the storm surge is highest, where the wind shear is most brutal, and where the gusts just rip structures apart.
And the distinction is so sharp that meteorologists sometimes use, well, softer terms for the opposing side.
They do. In contrast, the left side, the left rear quadrant, is sometimes called the gentler, or even the clean side.
Clean seems like an odd word for part of a hurricane.
It does, doesn't it? But on this side, the storm's forward motion actually subtracts from the rotational wind speed, resulting in slightly lower wind speeds. So it's rational, quantifiable advice. If you must be near it, try to be on the left of its path.
But,
as one source rightly pauses to inject a dose of Caribbean reality, nothing about hurricanes is clean. Even the so-called gentler side is still a force of catastrophic nature.
That distinction immediately leads us to the Jamaican geographical dilemma. You have to connect that specific scientific reality, the whole idea of a safe side, to an island that is barely, 145 miles across at its widest point.
Exactly. How could you have a safe side when the landmass is smaller than the diameter of the storm's overall wind field?
It just doesn't compute.
It means the concept of a safe side becomes entirely meaningless for Jamaica in this scenario. Melissa's wind field was projected to be over 200 miles wide. Jamaica, as you said, 145 miles wide. It literally cannot simply step aside.
So when forecasters traced Melissa's projected path,
The line went straight across the island, predicted to make landfall on the south coast, likely through Clarendon Parish, slicing straight through the central mountains and up towards St. Anne on the north coast.
so the scientific certainty was, well, the entire island would be immersed in the storm.
Absolutely. The country collectively held its breath because the data confirmed that if that eye passes over, there will be no safe side. There will only be the catastrophic progression of the storm, the initial bands of fury, then that strange temporary calm of the eye,
And then the other side hits.
and then the returning reverse direction violence. This certainty of fury meant preparation had to be total. No hedging bets.
That fleeting calm you mentioned, the eye, that's such a crucial psychological element of survival, isn't it? Describe the deceptive piece of the eye passing over land. It sounds almost like a moment of false hope.
It is the ultimate psychological trap. And the sources dwell on this because it's a moment that frequently leads to disaster for the unprepared or the unwary.
How so?
Well, when the eye passes overhead, the wind just falls silent. The rain stops, often quite abruptly. The sky above, if the eye is well defined, can turn this stunning, deep, bruised blue. Sometimes you even see glimmers of the sun.
Wow.
For a few short minutes, maybe up to an hour, depending on the storm speed and size, the world feels, well, the source says forgiven, as if the danger has simply passed.
And this is when people make the critical mistake. They think it's over. They come outside to look around.
Precisely. They peek outside, they drop their guard, almost forgetting the hours of roaring wind that just passed. But this stillness is just a pause before the next, often more violent phase hits the back wall of the eye.
The storm returns.
Immediately. And for the opposite direction. And the consequence is devastating because all the structural elements, the shutters, the windows, the zinc roofs, that just withstood hours of wind pushing in one direction.
Are now getting hit from the other side.
Exactly. They're facing wind pushing in the exact opposite direction.
So structures are suddenly compromised. They've already been weakened.
Yes. Windows that survived the initial onslaught, having already been stressed, might give way instantly. Trees that leaned one way are now torn the other way, often snapping clean off. The air becomes a weapon once more, as one source put it.
Terrifying.
It is. It's a terrifying physical consequence of basic weather physics and reverse stress. Understanding the deceptive piece is a fundamental lesson in hurricane country. You stay put until it's truly over.
And to compound this, Jamaica's physical geography acts as an amplifier. It's not just a flat island, it's mountainous. How does the landscape complicate the damage from a storm like Melissa?
The mountains. They're double-edged sword. Beautiful, yes. But they are also problem creators during a storm like this. They essentially split the island in two.
Creating funnels.
Exactly. They create natural funnels that accelerate wind through the valleys. The Venturi effect, amplifying localized chaos far inland. So coastal towns like Port Royal or parts of Kingston endure the immediate brunt of the storm surge, massive walls of water pushing inland.
But upland communities face different threats.
Different but equally catastrophic impacts. Those higher up in the parishes like Manchester or parts of St. Elizabeth, they endure massive landslides triggered by torrential rainfall and severe flash flooding where water just runs off steep slopes with nowhere to go.
So the source material makes a crucial point here. Every storm in Jamaica is both a unified national event, tracked moment by the government, and what was the phrase?
1,000 local tragedies stitched together, each one dictated by the local topography.
That really drives home the need for hyperlocal preparation.
It absolutely does. The precautions taken by a fisherman in a low-lying village on the south coast, focusing on storm surge and anchoring boats, are fundamentally different from the precautions taken by a farmer 3,000 feet up, who's worried about shoring up drainage ditches and managing slope stability. It's not one size fits all.
Okay, so faced with this scientific certainty of fury, an island too small to dodge the blow, we transition now to the human response. When the Meteorological Service issues that final, urgent hurricane warning, the source material describes a nation already in motion, shifting into what one writer called a choreography of readiness.
That's a great phrase for it. The official response is critical and immediate. You see the flow of information coordinated through ODPM, the Office of Disaster Preparedness and Emergency Management.
They're the backbone.
They really are. They're tracing the path of the National Emergency Operations Center, coordinating the opening of shelters in schools, churches, community centers. Radios crackle constantly across verandas and homes. The Prime Minister appears on television, urging calm, providing information, reinforcing the urgency of preparation.
ODP is crucial, but as the source highlights, the real character of the response is revealed in that Jamaican blend of efficiency and improvisation. It's a localized response that goes far beyond official government instruction.
Oh, definitely. It's the cultural memory taking over. Jamaica has a deep, painful memory of past storms. Hurricane Gilbert in 1988, for instance, was just catastrophic.
Changed everything.
It really did. That memory means people don't wait for the official directive to start tying things down. The response is described as a choreography because there is this quiet, determined grace to it. People know what they must do, and they do it. Without panic, mostly.
Give us some of those specific local rituals of readiness. What does that choreography look like on the ground?
Well, it's intensely personal and practical. You see shopkeepers in downtown Kingston hammering sheets of thick plywood over every glass window, a practice refined over decades.
Standard procedure.
Absolutely. You see farmers in the hills not just securing their homes, but painstakingly tying down livestock goats, cattle, often leading them to higher ground or into reinforced sheds if they have them.
And water.
Water is key. The priority is filling every available container with water bathtubs, buckets, drums, anything that holds water, because the water mains will almost certainly fail or be contaminated.
It's the storm routine, isn't it? Charging phones while you still have power, charging radios, securing vehicles, checking on elderly neighbors or those living alone.
Yes, exactly. And the source makes a beautiful connection here. These acts, the practical, manual labor of preparedness, they're seen not just as functional resilience, but also as an act of faith itself.
How so?
It's the belief that while providence favors the prepared, it's the conviction that you do everything humanly possible, everything within your power, and only then do you turn the rest over to a higher power. It's an active rather than passive form of belief. You meet God halfway, so to speak.
That makes sense. And this resilient spirit doesn't disappear when the wind starts blowing. In fact, it accelerates when the wind stops. Tell us about the immediate aftermath, the morning after Melissa's closest approach.
Right. So when dawn breaks over the island, the air smells intensely of mud, salt, and ripped vegetation. It's a very particular smell. The immediate reaction is to take stock, assess the damage, which, thankfully, in Melissa's case, was often described as mercifully restrained compared to the sheer magnitude of the initial threat.
And the community recovery.
It begins instantly. It's almost pre-programmed. Neighbors don't wait for government crews. They grab machetes, saws, maybe a chainsaw if they're lucky, and shovels to clear debris from roads, pathways, neighbors' yards.
Just get it done.
Just get it done. Children are already filling buckets from rainwater tanks or salvage containers, ensuring immediate access to non-potable water for washing and cleaning.
This local resourcefulness is what distinguishes the Jamaican response, isn't it? They refuse to be victims waiting for outside aid.
It is absolute self-reliance, born of necessity and historical context. You hear gospel songs playing softly on the radio, between the official updates from ODPM, providing comfort while the hard work is done. It's immediate local resourcefulness, a certainty that they will press on.
And this is perfectly encapsulated in that powerful anecdote you mentioned earlier.
Ah, the story of the fallen breadfruit tree.
Yes.
Exactly. The image of an elderly man sitting on his porch, just staring at this massive, valuable breadfruit tree that has been torn down by the storm. A huge loss, economically and culturally.
What does he do?
He doesn't despair. He doesn't wait for aid. He says simply, we'll plant another one. That's what we do.
Wow.
That phrase just encapsulates the entire national ethos.
Yeah.
Endurance, recovery, and the certainty of recommencement. It's a quiet declaration that they are not broken, merely bent. They'll rebuild.
This moves us into the layer of response that science cannot quantify, and which is so central to this deep dive, the spiritual architecture of the island. Our sources make it clear that while preparation is essential, there is a constant parallel conversation happening across Jamaica. Can God turn this one around?
This is the unquantifiable response, and it's profoundly important to understand its function. Across the island, prayer is a constant refrain, woven into the fabric of daily life before, during, and after the threat. Prayer meetings move online, or they gather in reinforced community halls.
Churches get involved?
Absolutely. Churches send mass text messages of encouragement and scripture. Social media fills with declarations, prayers like, God, turn Melissa back out to sea. We need mercy. It's everywhere.
And the source material is very careful to draw a line here, insisting that dismissing this belief as mere superstition is a profound misunderstanding of how deeply faith is rooted in Jamaican society. I want to spend some time here unpacking that distinction.
We really must. The source argues compellingly that this faith is not blind optimism or some refusal to accept reality. It is a historical declaration of resilience rooted in centuries of endurance.
You have to think of the context.
Exactly. A history marked by slavery, intense political upheaval, economic struggle, and this constant vulnerability to natural disaster, hurricanes, earthquakes. When you feel powerless against forces far greater than yourself, B, the economic, political, or meteorological faith provides the psychological and social architecture needed to withstand the stress.
It steadies the spirit.
It steadies the spirit while the wind rattles the very physical structure of your home. It gives you something to hold on to.
So it functions as a societal coping mechanism, really.
Yeah.
Unifying people and providing strength when the objective data is just terrifying.
Precisely. The church, or the community spiritual center, is rarely more than a short walk away in most communities. In these moments, prayer becomes an integral part of disaster management by reducing panic, encouraging communal support, and providing a framework for hope.
Hope is key.
It is. If you believe the outcome is not purely random, but subject to mercy, subject to intervention, you gain agency over your psychological response. You're not just passively waiting for destruction.
We get a very striking anecdote that captures this faith under siege from a community in St. Elizabeth. It demonstrates this spiritual strength even in the face of potential physical collapse.
Yes, it's powerful. Despite the urgent ODPIM warnings to evacuate to sturdy, certified shelters, a core group gathers inside their modest local church. A structure built with love, definitely, but not necessarily to modern hurricane codes.
And the storm hits.
As the outer bands hit, the lights flicker, the zinc roof creaks and groans under the pressure. You can imagine the fear. Yet they sing. They sing hymns like, "Through the storm, Lord, hold my hand."
Incredible.
A journalist who documented this scene described it as peace that defies explanation, because the rational response is panic. But the spiritual structure holding firm allows them to endure the physical trembling around them.
This defines the core tension beautifully.
Yeah.
The connection between data and devotion. Jamaicans trust the forecasters deeply. They recognize that the data saves lives, but they refuse to let go of belief.
It is the essential duality of the island. Science explains how the storm shifts. The barometric pressure drops. The Coriolis forces dictate direction. The wind shear applies the brakes, as we'll discuss.
Right.
Faith allows people to ask why the storm shifts, or why they were spared when perhaps others were not. The island lives constantly in the space between those two questions, the rational and the spiritual, side by side. Neither one needs to cancel the other out.
And here's where a deeper philosophical question emerges, one that you touched on earlier. For an external observer, maybe, relying on both objective science and divine intervention can feel like, well, cognitive dissonance. How does the culture reconcile that apparent contradiction?
By understanding that they serve different functions. The scientist's job is to explain the trajectory and reduce the physical risk through data and warnings. The faithful person's job is to sustain the spirit, manage fear, and prepare for the inevitable emotional aftermath, regardless of the outcome.
So the prayer isn't replacing the preparation.
Not at all. When the common refrain is that God can turn the storm, it's not an act of surrender to chance. It's an act of asserting possibility. It's the belief that for all our technology, we remain humble guests of nature, and that nature itself is not beyond grace or mercy. It keeps the soul anchored when the house might be flying away.
This tension, the absolute terror balanced by fervent hope, was dramatically resolved, or perhaps intensified, by the actual behavior of Melissa. We need to focus on that critical, agonizing moment late at night when the storm was at its closest approach to the Jamaican south coast.
Yes, the climax of this narrative really occurs in the dark. Late on the night of Melissa's closest approach, the satellite imagery and radar scans showed a subtle but absolutely crucial shift. The eye didn't just stall. It wobbled slightly to the southwest.
Just a wobble.
Just a wobble initially. But it was amplified over the next few hours, pushing the entire system further from the shore than originally forecast. This was the moment of deliverance. It was a movement that was small in meteorological terms, perhaps, but massive in human terms.
And the meteorological explanation for this shift is clear, though complex. It wasn't arbitrary. It was the result of upper-level wind shear. For our listeners, we need to explain this technical concept because it is the scientific core of the story.
Right. Wind shear is essentially the difference in wind speed and bore direction between two different altitudes. Imagine layers of air moving differently. In Melissa's case, a strong pocket of upper-level winds was moving across the storm's path.
Hitting the top of it.
Essentially, yes. Hitting the top of the cyclone like a strong shoulder, checking a spinning top. This shear disrupted the vertical structure of the hurricane, that column of circulation that keeps the storm strong and stable.
So the wind shear caused the storm's structure to lean, basically.
Exactly. When the storm leans, it often causes the process of recurvature, the storm bending its track, often away from land in this kind of situation. This disruption was just enough to shift the trajectory.
How much of a shift?
That wobble pushed the entire violent machine about 30 miles further offshore than the initial track predicted. Crucially, it kept the most violent right front quadrant, the absolute danger zone we talked about offshore. The data, the science, explains how the country was spared an unthinkable direct impact.
That's the objective data point. But on the ground, the feeling was immediate and overwhelming relief. Deliverance and Thanksgiving. The local interpretation was simple, immediate, and spiritual. They called it mercy.
The contrast is palpable. Scientists in Miami were talking about steering currents and atmospheric pressure gradients. But in Kingston, the collective sigh of relief was almost audible across the island. It was exemplified by the radio host on RJR, who simply stated, cutting through all the weather facts, "Jamaica, we give thanks, we give great thanks." It just shows how intertwined the two spheres are. The scientist provides the data for survival, the community provides the emotional context for endurance.
This leads to the paradoxical gratitude the source material mentions. Even when storms don't fully turn and damage does occur, you still had flooded roads in Clarendon, power lines down in St. Catherine. There's still gratitude. Why is that?
Because of the deep historical memory of catastrophic disaster. They remember Gilbert. They know what a direct hit feels like, what utter devastation looks like. Therefore, any mitigation, any turn, however slight, is seen as a gift.
It's about perspective.
It is. The gratitude is rooted in the belief in small mercies. A roof held that, by rights, maybe should have failed. A river stopped just short of washing away a home. They are grateful not just for what they saved, but for what they were spared.
And the fisherman's quote sums this up.
Perfectly. The fisherman in Port Royal, quietly observing the massive waves that still made the sea turn from turquoise to this iron gray, he just summed it up. God steer her away, man. Him still in charge. Simple as that. Faith and observation side by side.
It still seems potentially contradictory, though. If they rely on the science that clearly says preparedness saves lives, doesn't praying for the storm to turn feel like a wave avoiding responsibility, or maybe a form of denial of that scientific reality?
That's the critical question, isn't it? And I think it elevates the discussion. The sources argue it's not denial. It's an integrated worldview.
Yeah.
They utilize the data to execute preparedness actions, boarding up, getting water, which demonstrably saves lives.
The practical part.
The practical part. But the prayer is what saves the soul from crushing fear and paralysis. They understand that while human effort is absolutely required, the final determinant of the storm's exact path remains ultimately out of human hands.
So it's acknowledging limits.
Yes. By integrating prayer, they are declaring that they will prepare to the best of their ability, but they are also acknowledging the vastness and power of the forces involved. It is a spiritual discipline that prevents them from collapsing into despair when facing the scientifically predicted worst-case scenario. It fuels action rather than hindering it.
Let's turn now to how these hard-won lessons of survival, this confluence of science and spirit, inform the physical world, the literal architecture of resilience. Every hurricane, we're told, tests the endurance of both buildings and beliefs.
And this is where the practical and the spiritual truly merge into a cohesive design philosophy. Contemporary Jamaican building practices are a direct, often legally mandated response to the lessons learned from past storm failures, especially Gilbert.
So architects and engineers are involved.
Definitely. They're blending modern hurricane-resistant design principles with traditional Caribbean forms, ensuring that structures aren't just solid, but smart, designed for the environment.
What are those specific design techniques being employed today? We need to look at the details that help buildings breathe with the storm, as one source put it.
Right. We see a focus on, I'd say, 4 key areas. First, roof pitch. Traditional high-pitched roofs are highly vulnerable because they present a massive surface area for the wind to lift, like a big sail.
Makes sense.
So modern hurricane-resistant designs favor low-pitched roofs, often hipped roofs, which offer less leverage for the wind to grip and create less uplift force. Second, securing the roof structure itself. This is crucial.
Oh.
They utilize mandatory hurricane straps. These are metal tie-downs connecting the roof trusses firmly to the wall framing and ideally all the way down to the foundation. This resists the extreme uplift forces, especially from those dangerous quadrant winds.
So it's not just about the walls, it's about anchoring the entire envelope of the house right down to the ground.
Exactly. Third, the wall structure relies heavily on reinforced concrete blocks, filled with concrete and vertical rebar, creating strong columns and beams that can withstand lateral or sideways forces, not just vertical gravity loads.
And the fourth area.
Drainage and flexibility. Deep verandas can help protect walls. Strong foundations are required to manage both wind load and potential flooding or saturation. The simple goal, as the source states, is to build houses that can breathe with the storm instead of fighting it. Pure resistance alone often isn't sufficient. The structure must know when and how to bend, just slightly, without breaking.
And this need for physical flexibility perfectly mirrors the spiritual character of the people who faced Melissa. This seems to be the ultimate enduring lesson of survival here.
It is the unifying concept, I think. Survival depends on flexibility, on knowing when to stand firm on your prepared foundation, and when to bend, adapt to the inevitable forces of nature.
Resistance alone isn't enough.
No. This leads us back to that profound idea that faith, in the Caribbean sense, is not denial, but design. It's a spiritual architecture that is strong enough to face the elements without collapsing or losing its essential shape.
Because if you deny the danger, you don't prepare. If you just surrender to the danger, you don't act. You really do need both.
You need both. The synthesis of data and devotion allows for rational action driven by an enduring spirit. It provides the sustained moral courage needed for the immediate cleanup and the long-term rebuilding, that absolute conviction that they will plant another tree.
This culminates in the ultimate Jamaican ethos, perfectly summarized by that radio announcer after Melissa had finally drifted away. A phrase that seems to tie together everything we've discussed in this deep dive.
That quote is the ultimate distillation, isn't it? The announcer said. We give thanks for life today, but remember, preparation saves lives too. God works through readiness.
It's a perfect equation.
It really is. It combines the spiritual humility of giving thanks with the practical discipline of effective disaster management. It's an ethos that understands that technology and grace can and must coexist.
Life then resumes its quick, determined pulse. Schools reopen, markets fill up again, volunteers are out patching roofs, hopefully using some of those specific building techniques informed by the last storm. The quiet, enduring character of the people who faced Melissa is what is ultimately exposed, revealing a resilience that is both a practical skill honed over centuries and a profound, sustained spirit rooted in community and faith.
And that spirit, that ordinary grace. Neighbors sharing food when supplies are low, strangers offering shelter, communities cleaning roads before government crews can even arrive. That is the sustainable foundation of their resilience. They have lived through this cycle countless times. They trust the data enough to prepare, and they trust their God enough to persevere.
So we've learned that Jamaica's response to Melissa was a powerful demonstration that resilience is both a practical skill and a profound spirit, sustained by community and shared conviction, standing firm in that space between the scientific explanation and the spiritual interpretation.
The final summation from the islanders captures it all, I think. We're small, but we don't frighten easy. We prepare, we pray, and we press on. That, in the end, is the true layered architecture of the Jamaican way.
This deep dive leaves us with a compelling thought for you, the listener, as you navigate the inevitable moments of chaos or crisis in your own life. The science explained how Melissa turned, saving lives through preparedness and forecasting. The faith justified why the people had the strength to endure the terror, providing the psychological framework for action and hope. In your toughest moments, which is more powerful for you? The data that objectively explains how the wind will shift, or the belief that justifies why you have the moral strength to stand against it. Or perhaps, like Jamaica, finding strength in both.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the architecture of resilience.